About a month ago, Pantheon Rise of the Fallen's creative director, Joppa Perkins, took to their monthly newsletter to answer some of the community's most asked questions. And I made a summary of that, which I'll provide a link to, because he had some great answers to some great questions. And in fact, it went over so well that the community had even more questions that he decided to answer this month. But this month, Visionary Realms completely turned the tables on how they deliver new information. They are now doing bi-weekly video newsletters hosted by the developers live on their Twitch channel. And I'll get into that more in another video, but for now, Joppa was able to hop in front of the camera to feed us the beans once again.
This is BazgrimTV. Learn, laugh, level up.
Similar to the first round of burning questions, Joppa answered questions about the classes, because, well, who doesn't want to know more about their favorite class? And he did a really good job with it, so I'm mostly just going to let him talk, and then I'll interject in some places to provide some more context where I think it's needed. So Joppa, take it away.
How is the summoning and usage of Celestial Tomes going to work? Do I have to have it equipped in my weapon or shield slot to be working?
So this question is coming from the Cleric's class description page on the official website, where it says, quote, "After the Deicide War, communion with the Celestials is nearly unheard of. Thus, the Cleric can scarcely rely on their Pantheon directly. Instead, they must bind themselves to the ancient tomes of their order, the fading vestiges of light from when the Celestials had drawn near," end quote. We also see that tomes are listed as an available weapon, and some abilities even mentioned the summoning of tomes. So let's go to the answer.
Clerics will be able to summon tomes in the early game. They will go into your general inventory and you can equip them from there. Once that falls off, you will be finding more powerful, rare tomes out in the world. And yes, you do have to have them equipped. They are a secondary or an offhand item, and so they'll fit in the same slot that a shield would. Will the Dire Lord have the highest base health pool? And how will the Dire Lord's health scale against the other tank classes? So all three of the tank classes will have a higher base health pool than the classes in the other archetypes. But none of the three tank classes will have a higher base health pool than the other, not including starting race, starting attributes, things like that. But what you've picked up on here is that yes, many of the Dire Lord's abilities and traits emphasize higher health and grow more potent, sometimes exponentially so, based on the total health a Dire Lord has. So when it comes to tanking, the higher and higher a Dire Lord's health pool is, that is synonymous with maximizing their tanking potential, which is unique for them. You look at something like the Warrior, obviously high health is important for any tank, but the Warrior is designed more to see that kind of potency and maximizing their potential through armor class more effectively than just brute amounts of high health. But there is absolutely a connection between the Dire Lord's potency and the size of their health pool. This question is for the Druid, and it comes from Timmy on our forums. The question is, will all races of Druid be limited to Hirote the Fox Companion, or will there be different types of companions based on the Druid's race that are more appropriate for that race?
So who is Hirote the Fox? Well, I'm glad you asked. Quote, "As a preserver of the natural world, the halfling ward known as Masai has chosen to gift you with a mystical companion in the form of a small white fox. Your fox is a manifestation of Masai's own companion, the great white fox known as Hirote. As you begin your journey, your soul will be bound to your fox companion, and her soul will be bound to you. Through this bond, the two of you will be capable of more and more powerful and diverse feats as you progress on your journey," end quote. I think it's important to note here that Hirote does not make the Druid a pet class per se. Hirote cannot just jump into melee to tank and attack. He's more like a sidekick that you can command to perform certain abilities. So with that in mind, let's go back to Joppa.
Totally understand where this question's coming from. It comes down to time and resources. If we have the time and the resources to create some additional manifestations of Hirote for the different races to make it more fitting, then we will most likely explore that. This question is for the Enchanter. It comes from our forums. I've seen it come up a few times, and the question goes something like this. Will entity-based illusions, such as Illusion Ogre, allow the enchanter to not only look like the entity, but take on its traits or characteristics as well?
There's actually a couple of other interesting illusion abilities listed on the website, but rather than just reading them off to you, I'll leave them here and you can pause the video if you want to take a closer look.
Don't have a definitive answer yet, but I will say that I'm a big fan of progression. You can see it a lot in the different class designs where something starts small but then becomes more significant as you grow in power. So I would love to see something like illusions start off basic and just be a visual illusion. You appear to be something that you're not, and maybe there's some faction changes that come with that. But then also seeing a path of becoming more adept in your illusory arts, where it may eventually border on something more like transmutation, where you physiologically turn into the thing, taking on its traits and characteristics as well. I think something like that would be really cool. Okay, the next question is for the Paladin. This comes from the user Frigid on our forums. And the question is, Paladins are the only tanks that we've seen that have casting times for some of their abilities. What will this mean for their mitigation and avoidance? Will they be able to dodge, parry, block while casting? What about spell pushback? So first of all, Paladins have been intentionally designed without mana. That's to help them avoid the traditional anti-mana fare like silence, counterspell, mana drain, things like that, and the conundrum that can be for tanking in many situations, which relates to the other reason, which is to maximize their group readiness, to put them on par with warriors and dire lords when it comes to being able to sustain a group's momentum, not having to sit and wait, to get mana back between every fight, things like that. But yes, some of their abilities have casting times, which makes them vulnerable to spell interruption and spell pushback. They're being hit while trying to cast these certain abilities. So, but like I've said many times before, the class information we have released is not exhaustive. That would be a drag to have the entirety of what a class is capable of put out there, so that there's no discovery, there's no surprises once the launched game comes out. But in light of a potential gap or flaw like this, I'll go ahead and say that for the Paladin, they will have a way to grow into minimizing and reducing their vulnerability towards interruption and pushback. Whether that will ever be totally 100% mitigated, yet to be seen. Finally, on the topic of the passive mitigation while casting, that's something that we're going to monitor very closely in testing. As of right now, regardless of the class, while you're casting something, your passive mitigation skills like dodge, parry, block, things like that are not active. And if that proves to be punitive for the Paladin, if it starts to affect their competitiveness when compared to the other tanks, that's something we will address. But otherwise, I think it's a suitable counterbalance for the insane amount of utility that a skilled Paladin has at their fingertips. Okay, 2 in 1 here. We've got a question for the Rogue and the Warrior. I'm going to hit them both together. The first question for the Rogue comes from the user Bannock on our forums. And the question is, will Rogues be able to pick locks in Pantheon? Yes. And the next question comes from Tahoe on our forums for the Warrior. Will Warrior banners stack if there are 2 Warriors in the group?
Okay, let's talk about banners for a second, because the Warrior has 6 different banners listed on its class description page. Although, as Joppa pointed out earlier, these lists should not necessarily be considered exhaustive. These banners are abilities that allow you to place a stationary banner actually on the battlefield itself, and then any targets that are within a certain radius of it are affected by either the buffs or debuffs that the particular type of banners provide. And I personally think that this is a really good question because in past developer streams, we've definitely seen groups with multiple warriors throwing down multiple banners, but from our perspective as viewers, it was kind of hard to tell exactly what was actually happening. So let's hear the answer.
Yes, as long as they're not the same banner. 2 warriors, 2 different banners, they can use them both at the same time.
And that concluded this installment of Joppa's Burning Questions. If you found this helpful, hit the subscribe button now because I'm going to keep breaking down the new information from this newsletter and future newsletters, and I want you to be able to stay up to date. So until then, my name is Bazgrim, and thanks for watching.